Dragons have long captured the human imagination as creatures of immense power and terror, and among their ranks, evil dragons stand as some of the most fearsome antagonists in myth and fantasy. These malevolent beings embody corruption, destruction, and avarice in their purest forms, wielding devastating magical and physical abilities that can lay waste to entire civilizations. Unlike their metallic counterparts, who often serve as guardians and allies to mortals, evil dragons represent an existential threat to all who cross their paths, driven by insatiable greed, territorial dominance, and an inherent desire to subjugate or destroy lesser beings. Their very existence serves as a testament to the primordial forces of chaos and destruction that lurk in the darkest corners of the world. Evil dragons are characterized by their chromatic scales, which range across a spectrum of colors, including red, white, blue, black and green, each variety possessing distinct abilities and temperaments united by their fundamentally wicked nature. These creatures are typically solitary, claiming vast territories that they defend with murderous zeal against any who would dare intrude upon their domains. Their lairs become festering wounds upon the landscape, corrupting the surrounding environment through their mere presence and transforming once verdant lands into twisted reflections of their own malevolence. Evil dragons possess keen intellects that rival or surpass those of the most brilliant mortal minds, yet they apply this intelligence not to creation or enlightenment, but to schemes of domination, manipulation, and destruction. Their legendary hoards of treasure represent not merely wealth but trophies of conquest, each coin and gem a reminder of those they have defeated, kingdoms they have toppled, or innocents they have terrorized. Red dragons reign supreme among evil dragonkind as the most powerful and arrogant of their chromatic brethren, viewing themselves as the apex of draconic perfection and treating all other creatures as beneath their contempt. These massive serpents possess scales that gleam like molten metal or freshly spilled blood, and they make their lairs in volcanic mountains and other geothermically active regions where the heat matches their own fiery temperament. Red dragons breathe cones of scorching flame capable of reducing stone to slag and transforming entire armies into ash in moments, and they delight in using this power to demonstrate their superiority over lesser beings. Their pride is absolute, and their rage is terrible to behold, as even the slightest perceived insult can trigger a rampage that leaves entire regions devastated. Red dragons accumulate the largest and most impressive hoards, not out of mere greed, but as physical manifestations of their belief in their own supremacy, and they will stop at nothing to increase their wealth and influence. White dragons are the most feral and bestial of the evil dragons, driven primarily by base hunger and territorial instinct, rather than the complex schemes favored by their more intelligent cousins. These creatures make their homes in the frozen wastes of the world, amid glaciers and snow-covered peaks, where their ice blue or snow-white scales provide perfect camouflage against the endless winter landscape. White dragons exhale blasts of freezing cold that can turn living creatures into frozen statues in an instant, preserving their prey in ice to be consumed at leisure. Though they possess the lowest intellect among true dragons, white dragons are far from mindless, displaying cunning ambush tactics and a cruel enjoyment of hunting sentient prey across the tundra. Their hoards often contain the frozen bodies of their victims, alongside more traditional treasures, creating macabre galleries within their icy lairs that serve as testaments to their predatory nature. Blue dragons are master manipulators and schemers who prefer to achieve their goals through deception, political machination, and carefully orchestrated displays of power rather than through brute force alone. These dragons possess scales that shimmer with azure brilliance, and they claim the deserts and arid badlands as their domains, where they rule over networks of servants and thralls with iron-clawed efficiency. Blue dragons wield lightning as their breath weapon, calling down devastating electrical storms that can fry opponents where they stand or reduce fortifications to rubble. They are particularly vain creatures who take great pride in their appearance and their reputations, carefully cultivating fear and respect among the lesser races, while using intermediaries to extend their influence far beyond their immediate territories. Blue dragons often establish themselves as the secret powers behind mortal kingdoms and criminal organizations, pulling strings from their desert lairs while accumulating wealth and political capital in equal measure. Black dragons are perhaps the most sadistic and cruel of all evil dragons, taking genuine pleasure in causing suffering and watching their victims struggle in hopeless situations before delivering the killing blow. These serpents dwell in fetid swamps, poisonous marshlands, and other corrupted wetlands, their midnight black scales allowing them to slip unseen through murky waters and rotting vegetation. Black dragons breathe streams of corrosive acid, capable of dissolving flesh from bone and eating through the strongest armor, and they delight in using this weapon to inflict maximum agony upon their prey. They are patient hunters who prefer to toy with their victims, using the terrain of their swampland domains to ambush, separate, and terrorize groups of adventurers or travelers before moving in for the kill. Black dragons are also notorious for their vindictive nature, harboring grudges for decades or even centuries and going to extraordinary lengths to exact revenge upon those who have wronged them, no matter how insignificant the original offense. Green dragons represent the pinnacle of draconic treachery and deceit, combining formidable physical power with masterful skills in manipulation, lying, and psychological warfare. These emerald-scaled predators make their lairs in ancient forests, where they can move unseen among the trees, their coloration providing perfect camouflage in the verdant canopy. Green dragons exhale clouds of poisonous gas that choke and corrode all who breathe it, turning the very air into a weapon that kills slowly and painfully. They are consummate liars who enjoy nothing more than corrupting the innocent, turning friends against one another, and orchestrating elaborate schemes that bring about the downfall of kingdoms and heroes alike. Green dragons particularly delight in collecting not just material treasures, but secrets, favors, and leverage over powerful individuals, building networks of blackmail and obligation that extend their power far beyond what their physical might alone could achieve. They view conversation and negotiation not as alternatives to violence, but as additional weapons in their arsenal, means by which they can identify weaknesses to exploit and plant seeds of doubt and betrayal. The relationships between different species of evil dragons are characterized by mutual contempt, rivalry, and an uneasy awareness that they share more similarities than differences, despite their territorial and temperamental distinctions. Red dragons view all other chromatic dragons as inferior specimens unworthy of respect, though they reserve particular disdain for white dragons, whom they consider little better than bestial animals, while simultaneously regarding blue dragons as pretentious upstarts whose cunning cannot compensate for their lack of raw power. Blue dragons, in turn, look down upon red dragons as brutish thugs lacking sophistication, admire green dragons as kindred spirits in the arts of manipulation, though viewing them as potential rivals, and dismiss white dragons entirely as beneath their notice. Green dragons maintain a careful diplomatic distance from reds, whose fiery tempers make them unpredictable allies, find blues useful but ultimately too straightforward in their ambitions, and occasionally exploit blacks for their talent in creating suffering, though finding their sadism distasteful in its lack of subtlety. Black dragons hate all other dragons with equal venom, but will sometimes form temporary alliances with greens when their goals of spreading misery align, while avoiding reds who might destroy them in fits of rage and using blues when their organizational skills prove useful. White dragons, largely indifferent to the complex politics of their more intelligent cousins, simply avoid territorial conflicts with stronger dragons when possible and attack weaker ones when hungry, caring nothing for the elaborate hierarchies and rivalries that consume the other chromatic species. Despite these fractious relationships, all evil dragons recognize that they share a common enemy in metallic dragons and the civilizations of lesser races, and on rare occasions when faced with existential threats, they have been known to set aside their differences long enough to coordinate devastating attacks before inevitably betraying one another once the external danger has passed. Undead dragons represent the ultimate perversion of draconic nature, transforming creatures that were already evil in life into abominations that exist in defiance of the natural order itself. Dracoliches are perhaps the most terrible of these undead horrors, created when evil dragons voluntarily undergo a necromantic ritual to transform themselves into immortal skeletal undead, while retaining their full intelligence and magical abilities. These creatures sacrifice their physical bodies and their connection to life itself in exchange for eternal existence and freedom from the vulnerabilities that plague living dragons, becoming nearly unstoppable engines of destruction, bound by phylacteries that ensure their return even if their bones are shattered. Zombie dragons, by contrast, are typically created by powerful necromancers who have somehow managed to bind a deceased dragon's corpse to their will, resulting in shambling, rotting monstrosities that retain a dragon's physical power and breath weapons, but lack the cunning intelligence that made them truly dangerous in life. Both varieties of undead dragon spread corruption and decay wherever they go, their very presence causing plants to wither and the living to sicken, and they often serve as generals in the armies of liches and death gods, leading legions of lesser undead in campaigns of conquest against the living world. The nature of draconic evil transcends simple malevolence or selfishness, representing instead a fundamental opposition to the forces of civilization, cooperation, and compassion that allow mortal societies to flourish. Evil dragons embody a philosophy of absolute might making right, viewing their superior strength and magical power as justification for treating all lesser beings as property, prey, or playthings to be exploited for their own amusement. This evil is not the product of trauma or corruption, but rather an intrinsic aspect of their being, woven into their very essence from the moment they emerge from their eggs and growing stronger as they age and accumulate power. Evil dragons recognize no moral authority beyond their own desires, acknowledging strength only when it is sufficient to threaten them personally and showing mercy only when it serves their long-term interests to do so. Their immortal lifespans allow them to pursue schemes and vendettas across centuries, making them patient and implacable foes who can afford to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The evil of dragons is magnified by their intelligence and power, as they possess both the capability and the will to inflict suffering on a scale that lesser villains could never achieve, making them among the most dangerous threats any world can face. Evil dragons stand as embodiments of destruction, greed, and malevolence, given physical form and terrible power, each variety bringing its own unique brand of wickedness to bear upon an unsuspecting world. From the blazing fury of red dragons to the toxic treachery of green dragons, from the sadistic cruelty of black dragons to the unholy persistence of undead dracoliches, these creatures represent existential threats capable of toppling kingdoms and ending entire bloodlines. Their evil is not mere wickedness, but a fundamental force of nature, an expression of chaos and destruction that must be opposed by heroes willing to risk everything to protect the innocent from draconic wrath. The legends of evil dragons serve as reminders that true evil exists in the world, that it possesses terrible power and relentless will, and that only through courage, sacrifice, and unity can mortals hope to stand against such primordial threats and preserve the light of civilization against the darkness that dragons embody.